My last set of interview questions did not go as well as I would have hoped, so here I'm back to redeem myself to see if I have what it takes to be a full stack web developer. Welcome back to Web Dev Simplified. My name's Kyle, and my job is to simplify the web for you so you can start building your dream project sooner. And today I'm going to be attempting to answer full stack web developer questions of various difficulty. So to get started, let me just jump to the first random question. And here we go. The first question says, can a web page contain multiple header elements, and what about footer elements? This is 100% yes. You can have multiple headers, you can have multiple footers. The only HTML element that you should only have one of is the main element. The main element specifically says this is the main content and you can only have one. Well, also I guess the body, the head, and the HTML tag, you should only have one of those as well. And also an H1 tag, you should only have one of those on your page because it represents like the main header of your page. But that's different than the header element. I should say the H1 tag is like your main heading, while a header just specifies the header of anything. It can be a header of a card, a header of a modal, the header of your article, so you can have multiple different headers on your page. Same thing with footers. Here we go, yes to both. You can have multiple headers, multiple footers, so you can have them inside of like articles and section, for example. That was a pretty easy one, easy category, makes sense. Let's move on to the next one. What does the following code evaluate to? Okay, so this is a fun JavaScript question. What does the type of evaluate to? Because this essentially is saying type of 0, and then it's running type of on the result of this code. And I know for a fact that type of returns a string. So this code is going to say type of 0, which is going to give us a string with the value of number. So the type of this is going to be a string. And here we go, it evaluates to string because this evaluates to the string number. Yeah, exactly what I said. Couldn't have got that one anymore, right? I'm feeling much better already. First two questions down, and they were both pretty easy. Hopefully this gives me one a little bit more tricky. Here we go, we're in the hard category. What is HTML5 web storage? Explain local storage and session storage. So HTML5 web storage, I'm assuming, based on this question, means the introduction of local storage and session storage. For the longest time, all we had was cookies, and cookies are great for doing information between servers and clients, but they're not very good for just storing information on the client only. Local storage and session storage solve this problem 100%. They have super clean and easy to use APIs, and they work almost exactly the same. The API for them both is the same. The only difference is that local storage will store information on the client for a particular web page. For example, my website, webdevsimplified.com. If I store something in local storage, it'll be on that website forever until the user manually deletes it, or until I, with code, delete it myself. Session storage, on the other hand, only lasts for your current session. That means if I'm on my website, I'm logged into my site, I do some stuff, it saves some things in the session storage, and I close out of the website, all of the stuff in session storage is deleted. Or if I open a brand new tab on my browser and I go to the same website, session storage again is going to be deleted because it's per tab on my website. So every single tab I have for my website has its own session storage that's deleted as soon as I leave, while local storage is the same for every tab on that website and it stays there even when you close your browser. So let's see if that's what it is. Differences: data stored through local storage is permanent and does not expire. Session storage has the lifetime of the window or browser. And storage scope is scoped on a per window basis, so two tabs are different, while local storage is the same everywhere. Okay, and even right here it says that it was done with cookies in the past. Also, you can use IndexedDB, which is like a local database that you can use. So it's like if you need to store complex data, and local storage and session storage, they can only store strings, so they have their limitations. IndexedDB is good for that. I've never personally used it, but it's there. So I'm feeling real confident now. 3 for 3. Let's move on to the next one. Great, that's not actually a question. Let's move on to the next one. Here we go. What are refs in React and when should they be used? So a ref in React allows you to reference anything that you want, and it's not going to re-update the component when it changes. So with normal state, when you update your state, your component re-renders based on that new state. A ref, on the other hand, is just a variable that you want to store inside of React and have the value of, but you don't want to update the state every time it changes. By far the most common use case for refs inside of React is when you actually want to store a reference to an element. For example, if I want to focus an input element when I click on a button, I need a reference to that input element, which I can store inside of a ref. There's actually a special ref prop you can pass to any element in React, and then I'll have access to that input element and I can call something like input element.focus. So that is the most common use case for a ref. Otherwise, you can use it to store a variable in like a function component. So here we go. Oh, access to the DOM. There we go. Refs should be used sparingly. And that is true. You shouldn't use them all the time, only when you absolutely need them. Otherwise, you should just use React for handling everything. And here's just some code on kind of how you would do that. This is a class component example, but it works very similarly for a function component. You would just use the use ref hook here instead of create ref. There we go. 4 for 4. I am feeling great. Let's move on to the next question. Okay, the one directly above it. What is recursion and when is it useful? So recursion is simply just the idea of calling the same function over and over again. I have an entire video on this. I'll link in the cards and description for you. So one of the examples I like to give for recursion is essentially the idea of a tree. Imagine you have a tree that's like a person, and then it has their children inside of there, and then it has, for each of those children, it lists all their children, for each of those children, it lists all their children, and it goes down essentially an infinite level until you reach the people that have no more children. So at the very top, let's say you have this person named John, and you want to get all of the descendants of John, all of his children, all of their children, all of their children's children, and so on all the way to the very end. Well, doing this with a for loop is really hard because do you know how many children that they're going to have or how many levels of children John has? You don't know, because all you have access to is the next list of children at a given time. So the best way to do this is actually with recursion. You have a recursive function that's just going to take in John, and it's going to loop through all the different children to, put them in an array to return. And then for each of those people, it's going to call that same function again. So now if John has 3 children like Sally, Mike, and Bob, it's going to call that same function with Sally, then Mike, and then Bob. And it's going to continually just go down the chain, because now it's going to take all of Sally's children and call that function, and all of her children's children call that function, until you get to the point where Sally has no more children, for example. Then it kind of returns up that function, and in the end you get a giant list of all the different children that are being returned. That's essentially what recursion is. It's just calling the same function over and over and over again from within itself. That's the key here. So let's see. Repeated application of a process involves a function that calls itself repeatedly. So inside of this function, we have this function called nest, and you can see inside this nest function, we're calling nest again. So it's just constantly calling this function over and over and over again. They're using the example of comments here, and that's a really good example, very similar to my child example. So we've gotten all the questions right so far. I don't quite remember how many we're at, whether it's 4 or 5, but let's see what this next one is. What is the difference between a parameter and an argument? Okay, here we go. This is my kryptonite. If you've ever seen any comments I've written or videos I've done, I interchangeably use parameter and argument all the time. To me, they're both the exact same thing. I know technically they're different, but I don't actually remember which one is which. So one of them is the thing inside the function. So when you define a function, you give it, like, for example, 3 different arguments. I think it's arguments in my case. So like, let's say you define the function sum that takes in the argument a and the argument b. That's what you define the function as. Now, when you call the function sum and you pass it like the number 2 and the number 3, those are the parameters you're passing to the function. That is my guess. I'm like 60% certain, but we're going to see if I'm right or not. Nope, I was completely wrong. I had it reversed. So parameters are the things that you define the function with. Arguments are the things that you pass to the function. Honestly, this is useless information personally. If someone asked you this question in an interview, they're really just trying to get nitpicky. This information has nothing to do with your skill as a JavaScript developer. And these are actually the interview questions I really dislike the most, because it only asks, hey, have you heard this particular terminology and do you remember what it means? It doesn't ask, hey, do you know how to use parameters and arguments in JavaScript? Because it doesn't matter if you know what these are. It matters if you know how to use them. So personally, I'm not a huge fan of these types of interview questions. As you can tell by my extreme lack of knowledge in this category, it's not something I spend very much time on. So let's do one more question. Hopefully I can do a little bit better than this one, because this one is, like I said, my kryptonite essentially. Okay, we literally just did that question. Let's try again. Okay, what is a key and what are the benefits of using it in a list? So this is a React-based question, and the only reason you need to use a key in React is because React needs to know when to re-render elements efficiently. So if you have a list of 7 different things and you only change one of those items in your list, well, React wants to know which one you changed so it can re-render just that one item instead of re-rendering the entire array. By giving each item in your array a specific unique key, React can essentially say, hey, you changed this item, and the key is now different for this item right here, so I'm going to re-render that new item that has the new key. So it's just a way for React to optimize their rendering, because if you don't use keys, it's just going to have to re-render the entire array, every element in it, anytime a single element changes. So, yep, special attribute you can apply to any property. Must be unique. I don't remember if I mentioned that or not. You should not use indices, and the reason you shouldn't use indices is because if you have, for example, an array of to-dos and you like swap the place of one of them, or maybe you delete a to-do, all the other ones are going to be changing their index because they're now moving around, so it just doesn't quite work because it's not technically unique. Yeah, and let's see here. Avoid using indices. You should lift the key up. Yep. Stable identity help React identify changes. This is the key point right here, this one right here. It helps React to know what has changed to properly re-render only the DOM that it needs to. It just makes it more efficient. This felt good. I was real confident on pretty much every single question until we ran into, of course, my kryptonite of all questions, but it happens. I feel like we still did really good on this one, and I'm interested to know how you did in the comments below. Also, if you're interested in more videos like this, I've done 2 other videos just like this. They're going to be linked right over here. With that said, thank you very much for watching and have a good day.